Well, what's going on, GameLeap? This is the Jizz, and in today's upload, we're going to be talking about the 10 worst champions you can pick in lower elos, and these champions have the lowest win rate statistically in the game, and I'm not saying you can't win on these champions, because of course you can, but if you do want to print LP, it's probably best you stay clear of them. So we're going to get into why these champions aren't that great, and it might have something to do with the buffs and nerfs that came into 12.3, so make sure you stick around for the whole video to know the ins and outs of what's going on, because you can know which 10 champions not to play in 12.3, that's all well and good, but what's more important is knowing how to play with your testicles. Because having a clean pair of nuts that look, feel, and smell delicious is the foundation anyone needs to perform their very best on the Rift. That's why the Jizz and GameLeap have teamed up with male grooming giants Manscaped, who were kind enough to send the Jizz their Performance Package 4.0. And let me tell you, if anything is challenger tier in this world, it is the products within this package. So first off, if your downstairs area is packing more hair than bear stand suited, then we have the Waterproof Lawnmower Trimmer. This reduces skin shaving accidents thanks to its skin safe technology. Then we have the Weed Whacker Ear and Nose Trimmer, so you can keep the head looking nice and clean as well. And to make sure the process is fully capped off with a beautiful shine on those balls, you get a ball deodorant and also a toner just to finish that process off in style. So to get this package, guys, and 20% off, use code JIZZ, that's J-I-Z-Z, at checkout, also for free shipping as well with that code, so make sure you use it and check out the Manscaped links down below. So enough about the Jizz's testicles, let's get into the countdown, guys, and we're going to start off with number 10, and this is LeBlanc with just over a 47% win rate. And the reason LeBlanc has dropped down into the 10 worst champions for Platinum and below is simply because of the nerfs that came into 12.3. So your W's damage, this is down. This means that in terms of wave clear, which was kind of already bad, it's even worse. So you're going to be spending more time hitting minions rather than killing enemy champions. And even if you do go for that kill on the enemy champion, you're not dealing as much damage. And remember, because your distortions damage is down, this means the double distortion damage with your Q, this is also down as well. So in terms of one-shotting enemy champions, we're not going to be one-shotting as much, and because in lower elo in particular, LeBlanc mains are not going to average 10 CS per minute. They need kills to keep the gold ticking over and to snowball games, so this patch the nerf has had a real impact, but if you can get going in the early laning phase, LeBlanc no doubt still has enough damage to one-shot enemy champions because of Sorcerer Shoes, Luden's Tempest, and Shadow Flame, the magic penetration you're getting from these items, the damage output is going to one-shot any squishy champion, but if you don't start snowballing, it's going to be a real effort, and this is why LeBlanc is in this countdown. Now coming in at number 9, we're heading to the top lane and talking about a champion who might be a bit of a surprise inclusion here, because for Renekton, you might think the new Gore Drinker, Death's Dance, Black Cleaver, more of Malmortius. All these items are better for Renekton, but really they're not, because lots of other champions benefit a lot more from these items. And for Renekton, it's like your damage output, a bit like another champion on this countdown. To be honest, it's always been enough. You can still one-shot champions, no doubt. So the attack damage buffs, it's like you didn't really need them. And even if you do win lane, it's just that when you get to those team fights, which happen pretty much all the time in lower elos, you're very killable and squishier now because you're not getting as much HP from Gore Drinker. And with the new Sterix gauge as well, it's a lot better in 1v1 situations. So for sure, if you're split pushing on Renekton, it's a good thing, but most of the time you're going to be grouping with your teammates, so Sterix gauge is just worse, and it's also scaling off your bonus HP, which remember, Gore Drinker is giving you less. So this patch, the items haven't really been great for the Croc, but they have been great for other bruisers like Riven, Fiora for example. These champions can really exploit the new changes, whereas Renekton hasn't really changed that much, so there's no surprise he is one of the worst champs you can pick in 12.3. But another champion who's pretty bad to pick with a win rate just below 47%, this is Lee Sin in the jungle role. Now let me just say this, guys, in higher elo, Lee Sin, I'm telling you, is giga broken. With Gore Drinker, Death's Dance, Black Cleaver, this is a champion unlike Renekton who can really abuse the new stats on these items because Lee Sin loves attack damage. And because the healing from Death's Dance is scaling off that attack damage and also the Gore Drinker active, you're going to be healing for more as well. For a Conqueror champion like Lee Sin, it is impossible to kill this dude, and when you're playing him at the highest level, you know, every Lee Sin knows how to get the most out of this champion, it becomes very hard to deal with. But in lower elo, it's just the fact that people don't know how to use this champion properly, because he has a very high skill ceiling, and that's not a jab against low elo players, because some of us just don't have the time to master him. And when we do pick him, just because we're not getting as much juice as we can out of the champion, what that really means is we're not playing him optimally, and that is the real reason why Lee Sin still has a pretty bad win rate in lower elos, elos despite all the items getting changed in his favor. Now coming in at number 7, we're heading to the bot lane here and talking about one of 2 AD carries on this countdown, and this is Kalista. And I don't think there's really any surprise here because Kalista, like Lee Sin, has a very high skill ceiling. To be able to auto attack and move and space to stay alive and deal damage, it's probably the hardest thing to do in League of Legends, and because Kalista doesn't really have any innate escape, if you get jumped on once, if you get slowed once because you're passive, you're probably dead as well. So it's a very hard champion to make work in solo queue. In a coordinated environment, don't get me wrong, in pro play, sometimes she can work, but in solo queue it's just too much of a hassle. So I'd really stay away from Kalista in 12.3, and this next champion is an interesting one coming in at number 6, because last patch, he was one of the most broken champs in the game. So what's happened in 12.3 for Corki is that he has been nerfed, of course, and this is why his win rate in Platinum Below is around 46-47%. So what happened? Riot have nerfed your package. So the timer now for the first package is at 10 minutes. This is 2 minutes after Rift Herald, so the enemy team can do Rift Herald and they don't have to worry about your package 1v9ing. And that same concept applies now to the package restock timer, which is now 5 minutes. So it's not 4 minutes. This means the enemy team has a lot more opportunity to finish the Drake before you restock your package and do exactly the same thing you were doing at Rift Herald. So this means that Corki's influence on the map is a lot less than what it was. Now of course you still have all the damage in the world, nothing's changed here, and your items are still really good. So if you go Luden's Tempest, Mirror Mana, Shield Bow, Mirror Mana, you're still going to be hitting extremely hard, but just because of this package nerf, Corki has dropped down considerably in terms of win rate, and because this champion as well does have kind of a high skill ceiling, this is why his win rate is pretty low in lower elos, and there are definitely better champions to pick and carry on. But ahead of Corki starting off the top 5 in terms of worst win rates in the game, this is Olaf with just over a 46% win rate, and all these bruiser item changes that came into 12.3, you might think like, well, they sound good for Olaf, but here's the thing, like Renekton, you don't need all the damage in the world, he has good DPS. So because the new Gore Drinker is giving you less HP, and Steris Gauge as well, which you were building before, because it's scaling off your bonus HP, the shield, and because the attack damage is scaling off your base AD, this really doesn't come into effect until the late game, and to be honest, it's just straight out worse for Olaf. So when you are fighting in those mid to late game team fights, you do not have the survivability or durability you need to get past the enemy frontline onto their backline and just axe them to bits. You're going to get blown up so much quicker now, which is why this champion is still pretty unfavored, and to be honest, just one of the worst champions in the game. But a champion who's more worse off than Olaf in 12.3, this champion's win rate is around 45.5% in Platinum and below, and this is Azir. And to be honest, the Emperor Shurima has been a mainstay on these worst champion countdowns for as long as I can remember. Now the issue with Azir is that if Riot buff him too much, he will get picked at every single pro game. So they have to be a little bit careful here, I understand, but Azir, like lots of champions on this countdown, has a really high skill ceiling, and like some other champions, he can't really one-shot enemy champions. He really needs a team around him to perform. It's not like you're playing a Yone or a Zed or a Kha'Zix, you're playing Azir. It's a lot slower play style, and because of this, games are going to be drawn out, and you can't win games on your own as much. This is why in solo queue, it's extremely risky picking him in the mid lane, especially when you're blind picking him, because there are so many assassins and counter picks to him that really make his life hell, so do be careful picking the pigeon again in 12.3. But another champion you have to be careful picking in the lower elos is Aphelios. Now in pro play, a bit like Azir, Aphelios is a very popular pick, because in terms of the team environment, he brings a lot to it, because of his Graviton root, and because of his damage output, and because your support is going to peel you. In solo queue, these don't exist. Your support does not know what Aphelios does. Heck, they probably haven't even read what you do. So when you've got someone standing next to you for most of the game who has no idea what on earth you do, you're really in a bit of a pickle. And because like Kalista, you don't have an innate escape in your kit, it's not like you have an arcane shift like an Ezreal, or you have a tumble and a condemn like a Vayne, you are just a mobile Aphelios. And because your team is not going to understand how to play around you and protect you, you really are a sitting duck in most solo queue games, and this is why this champion, like Azir, has around a 45.5% win rate, but it's not as bad as the runner-up to the worst win rate champion in the entire game for 12.3, and this is Ryze in the mid lane with under a 45% win rate. And really the problem for Ryze is, well, it's kind of always been the same, because if Riot put him in a really strong position in solo queue, guess what? He's going to be picked in every single pro game, so they do have to be careful. But the fact is that Ryze in solo queue is still extremely hard to make work, because he's very squishy, has no innate escape, and even though you might scale and become the side lane beast you kind of have always been, but like I said for Azir, you're not going to one-shot enemy champions, and your damage output, ever since Riot changed the Archangel staff to scale off ability haste and not your ability power, this means you're not going to deal as much damage as before. For sure, you might have your cooldowns up more often, but is this really worth it? It just means you have more utility rather than damage output, and this is why in lower elo solo queue, Ryze just really doesn't work, and he's a very hard champion to actually make work because you need your team to play around you and understand what's going on, so Ryze comes in at number 2, and it's exactly the same, guys, for the #1 worst champion on the Rift in 12.3. And again, I'm not saying you can't win on these champions, of course you can, but if you play Twisted Fate, you have a 44% chance of winning. That's how grim it is at the moment, and that's all because of the nerfs that came in to 12.3, because we were only talking about last patch how Twisted Fate was one of the most broken champions in the game. Now, to be honest, I still think this champion is kind of broken, but just because we're playing off utility with Everfrost and Rapid Fire Cannon, we're trying to lock down enemy champions so our team can come in and clean up. That's the issue. We need our team to know exactly what we're doing. We can't one-shot champions. Of course, you might want to go Lichbane, Deathcap, these offensive AP items, but it's a lot better to play Twisted Fate to set up your teammates. This is why in pro play he's still going to be picked a lot, and ever since Riot changed TP, so you can only TP to your towers in the first 14 minutes, think of Twisted Fate's ultimate. It's still all the same, but the attack speed nerf in your E makes your wave clear and early laning trading a little worse off, and your Q's damage going down in the early game, even though it might be scaling more off your AP. We don't really care about AP at the moment on Twisted Fate. We're about Everfrost, Rapid Fire Cannon, like I said, and stunning those crucial targets on the enemy team from range, so our team can capitalize on our CC and win the game for us. So these nerfs have seen Twisted Fate with just over a 44% win rate in the last few days, and those were the 10 worst champion guys to pick in solo queue for 12.3. If you want to play them, go ahead. You're still going to win games, of course, but it is just less likely. So if you did enjoy the video, guys, of us informing you on who the worst champions are in the game at the moment, let us know by leaving a like down below. Any thoughts or comments, leave them in the comment section, and until tomorrow's daily Season 12 upload, this has been the